Welcome everyone to the another episode. Today we have a Libby Supan all the way from US, California. So Libby is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified intuitive eating counselor, and someone who has personally recovered from 20 years of struggle with an eating disorder. Her personal journey fuels her deep passion for helping others in their own recovery. Libby runs a therapy and coaching practice, specializing in supporting individuals who are exhausted from obsessing over food and body image. So most of our clients are caught in the binge and restrict cycle and are seeking for like a break free from it. So she is dedicated to guiding a many as people possible towards intuitive eating and the life of the true food freedom. So in this episode, we learn with Livy's journey, how she got into this coaching and started her practice, and obviously sharing how she helped her clients and their journey. So without further ado, let's get started with Livy and welcome to the show. So Livy, welcome to the show and how are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm doing pretty well. I've already had two groups earlier this morning and I just feel pretty good about it. So it's a good day so far.
That's great. Excited. So you're in California, right? Isn't it?
I do. Yes, I'm in Northern California.
Yeah, it's super early for you, I guess, because I'm in a
Um
5 p.m. in UK.
it's 9:09 a.m. right now.
Yeah, we got about 8 hours difference, I believe.
Yeah,
So yeah, different parts of the world, different weather, and everything is different. But obviously, the way we can work right now is the technology and everything. It makes it so much easier. And I'm
I
super
know.
excited and grateful, like you come to the show and sharing your journey, which is really inspiring how you have changed your course of eating and the eating disorder you had, and obviously how you're helping others individuals. So walk me through about your journey, what is actually inspired you to working others. So when did you decided like you have the kind of disorder, like you realize kind of thing? Obviously,
Yeah,
obviously we have to realize this, and like we sometimes we feel like we have some kind of disorder and we have no clue. So when
right.
did you discover like you had the eating disorder, and how your journey began from it?
Yeah, okay, great question. So there's yes, this is a big answer. So I started engaging in disordered eating behaviors in my high school years.
Mm,
And there was so much going on underneath everything before I started acting out in behaviors. So oftentimes, like, there's already kind of things brewing in the background, if you will. So there's like, things going on at home. So there's fat phobia in the house. So like a lot of talk about appearances and one parent always like on diets wanting to lose weight. Just knowing like being uh told that like, popularity and appearances were kind of everything. So that was, in my upbringing. And then high school years, I had a big, well, at the time was a traumatic event for me, which we moved as a family. And because of that move, I was just like I think for the first time, like actually in a depression episode and had no friends, and it was just really awful. It was freshman year of high school, and that's when I started engaging in restricting food. But
yeah.
I didn't think I had a problem at all. Like I seriously thought I was like kind of almost had a superpower, and that like nobody else understood, but like I kind of was this one person who had like the secret and the ticket. And I knew that if you restrict food, you're going to be better and you're going to lose weight and you're going to be healthy. That's how I used to think at the time. So I did not think I had a problem. Um, I did start losing weight, and my mom, and I didn't have weight to lose, and my mom made me see a therapist. I went to one session and I don't think I spoke one word. So that didn't, work so well.
Mm,
Because I didn't think I had a problem. I did not think I had a problem. So anyways, my high school years were kind of yeah, again, I didn't think I had a problem. College is when it really started, because in college is when I started binge eating. And what happens is when you restrict food, most of the time, most people biologically cannot sustain that for so long. And what happens is you get these biological responses that you are triggered to eat a bunch of food in a short period of time, which is called a binge. So I started binge eating which was also like my absolute biggest fear going to college. I was so scared of the dining halls because I knew the dining halls were going to be like a potluck type. I'm not sorry, not potluck, like buffet, all you can eat type of situation. And that seemed really scary to me. So I avoided the dining halls for seriously probably a month and a half. And my roommate finally was like, "You're being weird. People are talking. Like, you need to go to the dining halls." So I go to the dining halls, and it was immediately I started binge eating. I broke, I broke like the frozen yogurt machine, like almost like every other day in the dining hall because I just ate so much of it. And it would just, I don't know if you even know what a frozen yogurt machine was, but
Right.
it just wouldn't stop. And so this frozen yogurt is going over everywhere. And it was so embarrassing every time, but I still did it because I was in this like mind state of this like caged tiger being let out. And it's like, I have to eat. I can't stop eating. So, anyways, this went on for a long time. So I started gaining weight pretty quickly. And that was terrifying because that was my biggest fear in my whole life was to gain weight. And it started happening. So I didn't know what to do. I felt desperate. So I started purging in different ways. I couldn't purge the traditional way. I physically couldn't do it. So I, did other things like over exercise. And I don't want to get too specific because I don't want to trigger anybody, but
Yeah.
I did a lot of over exercising. I did a bunch of other things too. And that's kind of how I managed my weight, if you will, even though I couldn't manage it. I would go up and down in weight like it felt insane. I probably at all times had 5 different sizes of clothes, just kind of like 5 sets of wardrobes, if you will. And it was awful, just awful. Never knowing is today the day that I'm gonna like not be able to stop eating, and then that turns into like a month, and then you're however many pounds up, and then everyone notices and everyone just keeps talking about it. And I did cheerleading and dancing in college, and then I also did professional cheerleading and dancing after college. And you're just scrutinized with the uniforms you wear and makeup and all of it. So I mean I put myself in those situations. um but yeah, I mean, it was just years of
Mhm.
being on a diet, restricting food, hating everything, being jealous of everybody, comparing myself to everybody, hating what I see in the mirror, and then having this urge to binge and then not stop being able to eat and then putting on a bunch of weight. And I mean, that's just how my life was. And this, I mean, it wasn't just that, it trickles into everything in your life. So
Yeah.
every relationship I had, whether it was like a friend, an acquaintance, just like a classmate, a boyfriend, if I'm dating, I mean, it just affected everything. It was like almost this like other being or entity in the room that was
Mhm.
invisible, but like so present. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like the one boyfriend I had for throughout most of my years in college. And I mean, looking back, it was awful. It was seriously like there was 3 of us. And because I was in it and I didn't understand what was happening, I didn't know how to talk about it, or I didn't even understand what was going on. But it was to the point where I would steal his roommate's food, like in secret, and then lie about it. And I mean, just the embarrassment of all of that. And he obviously knew it was me. So yeah, that this went on for a long time. And so in college is when I realized, oh my gosh, like this is not okay. This is a problem. I thought I was the only one who had this issue. I did not know anyone else dealt with this. I seriously felt like I was an alien. So I was now on a mission to get better. And I searched and sought out help in every way. I read all the self-help books. I went to different like meetups for like nutrition. I thought if I knew nutrition, then I'll figure it out. I was a nutrition major, and that just made it worse. Um, so
Mhm.
yeah, I probably 30 different therapists, and half of them would say they specialized in eating disorders, and then to find out like, wait, they don't even understand what I'm talking about. So, and then it feels worse. I'm like, okay, now there's something wrong with me. Um, and yeah, I was denied from actual like treatment to a treatment center because I wasn't technically underweight. Fortunately, things are changing, so that's not necessarily a requirement these days. But yeah, I was kept being denied by my insurance company and not being able to get into real treatment because of that. So I was really limited. So finally, I was able to go to treatment. And this was after 15 years of being in a 12-step program for an eating disorder that was actually making it worse the whole time, but I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So I finally get into real eating disorder treatment because insurance is insurance. I was not given the proper amount of time, but what it did is it planted the seed. I finally like learned some really big ideas and concepts and realized, okay, this is what it's about. I understood the problem. I wasn't like much better, but I knew, okay, at least now I know, so I kind of know where to go after treatment. And I just continued on that path of like anti-diet culture, intuitive eating, anti-fat phobia, health at every size, all foods fit. And I really just kept in kind of that world, if you will. And just little by little over time, it gets a little bit better. And at this point, I mean, I'm covered in everything, but the entire time, once I was in college, I told myself that if I actually ever get better, because I truly didn't think it was going to happen for me,
Mm.
I told myself that I have to then help others because my experience in trying to get help and get better was not okay. It is not supposed to be that hard. It should not have been that hard for me. And I feel so much for my past younger self that it was that hard because it shouldn't have been that hard. So that's why I'm here and I'm doing what I'm doing. And I can't imagine doing anything different.
Yeah, it's a great journey. Like you had to be where you are right now, and obviously it's not never easy. Like changing the habits like you have, and then obviously you have to change it completely, isn't it? Like this is like a tough thing to do. So walk me through about that process you had when you have decided like you're gonna change the way you've been eating, and so what was like your first step? Did you have to get some guidance from someone
Yeah.
else, or like you had to do your own? How was the
Yeah.
process looks like?
So I think where how I can answer that is like the first kind of big aha that happened for me was when I'm in treatment. And it was a day that we were in the intuitive eating group, and the dietitian was facilitating, teaching this group. And it wasn't that I hadn't heard this before from like my other therapist, but it was the first time I like knew it, if that makes sense. Like I
Hmm.
I I knew to believe it to be true
Right.
is the idea that, wait a second, I actually never did anything wrong. I've only ever done what diet culture has told me to do. And diet culture is everywhere. It's in all of us. It's in every message we receive from all sorts of people and like messaging. And it was like, wait, all I've done is, try to be better, be healthy, diet, eat less. But what they also don't tell you is, oh, and just so you know, if you restrict food, you're probably going to have a biological urge to binge eat. They don't tell you that part. So it's like I finally realized it was never my fault. All I did was what I was told to do. And because I'm a human being, I experienced urges to binge eat. And of course I
Yeah.
binge ate and then would restrict because I was scared of it, and then binge ate and then restricted. So that was the first kind of like, I was like mind blown. I remember sitting in group and like almost having this visual that like the clouds were parting and I could see the sun. And it was this just, oh my gosh, my whole life I've been fed these lies. And it felt almost like I was in a cult.
Hmm.
And I mean, it is, the word is diet culture, but I really had felt like I had been brainwashed because I had, and that
Yeah.
I had been in this cult for decades. And so finally I'm learning, oh my, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm here. So that was the very first thing that happened for me. The second thing was, and I had heard this for years, but knowing that I have to give myself full permission to eat what I want when I want is like the where you start.
Yeah.
And that's how you lift the obsession. And that was always terrifying because my biggest fear has been weight gain. And I knew I couldn't trust myself. So, like, how can you tell me to eat whatever I want whenever I want? Because I will blow up, I will explode. But I finally learned and believed that, okay, I understand. I now understand why I have to do that because for decades, I had been giving myself the messages and now beliefs that food was inherently bad and that certain food groups were off limits and horrible for you. But that is exactly what was creating the obsession and um, the binge trigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a slow process.
Yeah, it takes time, isn't it? Like for changing the way you used to think before, and obviously it's just a mental game rather than a
Yeah.
physical. Like you have to have a control, right? It becomes some kind of like addiction, isn't it? Like and have
You
to that
know,
avoid.
yeah, I'm so glad that you said that word addiction because for 15 years that I was in that 12-step group, I actually self-identified as a sugar addict and
Hmm.
I fully believed I was a food addict. Like that's what I called myself. And I now know that, I've, been in many years of schooling and whatever. You can't actually be addicted to food. You cannot be addicted to something you need to live. Um, but it can certainly feel like an addiction.
Yeah.
It's the intermittent restriction and then which leads to the binging. But yeah, so it can absolutely feel like an addiction, but it's not scientifically or technically an addiction.
Yeah. So how long was the process like since from your old habits to new habits to create?
Yeah. Oh man. I honestly don't know how to answer that because it's been so long and so slow. Um, what I can say is if like I was getting help today, it would
Hmm.
be night and day difference. I would have recovered so much faster because the help available today is incredible, in my opinion, compared to how it used to be.
Yeah.
But I would say like, I mean, and all of this is, at this slow pace because of my fear and my fear of weight gain. And so it was really slow. So the first thing I really did was, okay, I had to start eating my fear foods at normal times in the day than just binges. Because binges weren't like they were considered like not, I wasn't giving myself permission during a binge. It was like happening to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So really learning to like, okay, eat chocolate malted crunch ice cream at lunchtime. Like it's part of lunch. Or to eat it as an afternoon snack, not as your binge before you go to bed at night.
Mm. So
Another, oh, go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
So obviously, like there is like a process you have to go through, isn't it? Like slowly
Yeah.
to yeah. So like I remember when I was going through the same kind of process, like changing the eating habits because I have ulcerative colitis with the gut issue and
Oh,
the
I had that too.
yeah. So obviously, like how it's gonna feel like when you're changing like your diets and everything else and a lot of things you have to change, isn't it? Like the way you sleep, the way you think, the way you
Yeah.
manage your stress, and obviously eating is the biggest one.
Yeah.
So, and I believe like when I was changing the whole diet, like I wasn't feeling myself like yeah, I was just missing something. Like I think like the first 2 months it was like really difficult. So when you was like going through the process, like did you stop everything like immediately, or was it like gradually taking off like one thing at a time?
It was very slow and very gradual. And I also like so much of this was on my own because,
Yeah.
like I said, I only had so much time being in treatment and it wasn't even at the level I needed. It was too low of a level.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I had, my therapist who I'd see on a weekly basis. I was in individual therapy and group therapy, but truly, like for a lot of people, that's just not enough. And on a little side tangent, why I created the group coaching program that I did because it is like so self-contained. There's so much support. Um, but yeah, it was really, really slow. It was really slow. And I would have lapses and get back into binge episodes. And yeah, I mean, it's just been slow.
Yeah. So obviously that slow growth, did you have the feeling that time like you cannot carry on with the process you are on, or you feel like a giving up? Like did you have the moment?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
So while you're going through that process, did you have the moment like it's not working for you, or like do you want to give up because you cannot stick to the plan? Did you have the kind of moments when you was making the changes?
Yeah. So what you're saying is, did I have moments of like wanting to give up and just like, this is too hard?
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, like it's been a slow process. A lot of time when something doesn't happen overnight, obviously, we feel
Absolutely.
like this is not worth it. Like it change it, and yeah, there is no hope. You know what I mean? Like in life, it happens. So, did you have them kind of moments? And if that happened, then what did you do for it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm just thinking of like all the age, like the age range that I've, in this experience. Like it was, my teenage years, my 20s, my 30s. Um, yeah, there was a lot of times when I would mess with restricting food to fit into some costume for Halloween or for, the dress for New Year's. But I also knew like I'm asking to play with fire if you're going to try and restrict food.
Mm,
Um, because in my experience, when I restrict food, I'm going to be triggered to binge eat, whether it's in 10 minutes or in 10 days or in a month. It's just kind of like the way what I'll say to my clients is, hey, if you choose to restrict food, like your prerogative, but what you're also doing is you're asking for an urge to binge in your very near future, and then you'll probably binge eat. So it to me, it's the restriction. So that was, and I don't know if I'm answering your question specifically, but one of my first like biggest boundaries I set with myself in recovery was you will never diet or restrict again. And
yeah,
I've stuck to that. And like that's been, I mean, I haven't restricted or been on any kind of a diet for years at this point, but that was the very first kind of big black and white boundary for myself. Like you do not restrict food ever.
yeah.
So,
So, yeah. So obviously, the change you had to work on, obviously, you're helping with other individuals on their journey. So, whatever you learned so far, what is the number one key lesson you could like to
hmm,
share with our audience today? Like the habits you have created and changed the way you are right now.
yeah. Well, there's so much I want to say, but if I'm only allowed to say one thing, I think the one thing I want everyone to know is if you are in the binge restrict cycle or yo-yo dieting, whatever you want to
Mm,
call it, you need to look at the diet or the restriction. That is the problem, and that is the cause of the overeating, the overconsuming, the binge eating on food. So start looking at the restriction. That's the problem. The binge is simply a symptom of the restriction.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing the lessons. So, what is the we are nearly coming to the end of this podcast. So, before we wrap up, I have a last question. So, what's
Yeah.
the future for you? Like, where are you seeing yourself next 5 years or 10 years? The vision you have helping other individuals.
I love that question. Where I see myself in 5, 10 years is similar to where I'm at right now, but I really see my food freedom breakthrough group coaching program. I just have these visions that it's going to be just explode and I'm going to have an amazing community of like-minded people that are on the same path and we are all in support of each other. The group I have now is, I mean, like the most incredible group of women. It's amazing to me and they show up for themselves and each other every single day. And I imagine it to be what it is now, but kind of like times 10.
Yeah,
That's my goal.
that's great.
Yeah.
S- So, Libby, thank you so much for coming to this show. We are nearly finishing the podcast today. So, before we finish up, like if anyone wants to learn more about yourself or your business, where is the best place to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will give you, if you want to share it in the show notes, I can give you a link for my free training. I think the best way to find me is on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm Food Freedom with Libby. And pretty much everything, if you just, Libby, anything, you'll probably find me. And then also my website is just libbysupan.com. So Food Freedom with Libby, libbysupan.com, and I can give you a link to my free training.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time. I really wish you very best of luck with everything you do. And thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And that was my pleasure. Thank you. So that's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode with Libby Supan. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If anyone wants to learn more about her, I can leave all of the links on the description for you to find our social links, also our free training in there. So until then, I'll talk to you in our next episode. Take care.